Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
The midterm election results are in, and we'll take a look at the local and national implications. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. The expected red wave did not arrive, but here on the Eastern Shore, Republicans held sway with the re-election of Congressman Andy Harris and the ascension of newcomer Julie Giordano to the Wicomico County executive job. Later in the program, Brian Russo will be looking at the results coming out of Worcester County. In our studio this morning is Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Don.
So let's get a certain overall view of what happened here in Wicomico County. Particularly, we had the county executive, Julie Giordano, apparently is the big winner in terms of the election. No real surprise there. But what does all of this mean, and particularly the complexion of the county council?
Right. The county council, as the mail-in ballots are being counted, is still up in the air in terms of the at-large seats. What we know for sure is that John Cannon, the current council president, Republican, he will be reelected. He has a big lead. We know that Megan Outen, who was a Democrat, she will probably still finish fourth of the four people running for two seats. So there is a mathematical possibility that Brad Gillis could catch James Wynn for the second seat. In at-large, Mr. Wynn is a Republican, Mr. Gillis is a Democrat.
So what does that mean, do you think, in terms of his leadership? And do we expect then Cannon will then continue on as president of the county council?
Yeah, we'll have to see. There will be a Republican majority on the council. It looks like, based on the numbers right now, that it'll be a 5-2 Republican majority on the council. Currently, it's 4-3. But we'll have to see how those voting alignments work out. District 2, Jeff Merritt was elected there. We're not sure how conservative he's going to be on the council. We know pretty much that Shane Baker will be aligned with Julie Giordano for sure. James Wynn will also be aligned, and we're pretty sure we know that Joe Holloway will be aligned. So she'll always have 3 votes for things that she wants to get done. It looks like that the swing vote for a lot of things is going to be Jeff Merritt.
What do we think that then means in terms of things getting done in terms of the county? I mean, because county government tends to be, and local government tends to be, very practical as opposed to something that's much more ideological.
It's interesting. People don't like to hear the minutia, but the minutia is really important, and the process is really important as we go forward. There's a lot of agreement on what needs to be done. The questions are going to be how that they do it. So as an example, the water and sewer situation, everyone agrees that that's something that the county needs to fix. But how you're going to fix it, how you're going to align yourself with the city of Salisbury, whether you're going to build plants, who's going to pay for all of it, those are big issues that, that politics will play a role in making those decisions. Things with the airport. Everyone agrees that we want the airport to be better as an economic jewel. But how much money are you willing to spend to make the airport better? What steps are you willing to take? Are you going to capitalize that over schools? And then, of course, there's always the schools issue. We saw so much heat from school issues in this election in the county. Everyone has their lane in these things. County executive has a lane, county council has a lane, school board has a lane. You're supposed to stay in your lane, but will the county executive or even the county council try to use their influence in terms of schools? Julie Giordano being a teacher, and we've talked about this before, whenever you get promoted to something, you try to do your old job the way you really wanted to do it. Will she try to have some sort of influence on the school board and on the superintendent? That's going to be interesting to see whether she stays in her lane. We saw Bob Culver, when he was elected, 12 years ago, he really tried to affect the capital spending on the schools. Some decisions have been made about things that are going to be built. He tried to get in there and interfere with that and change things that the building committees had decided on, and he was rebuffed very quickly, and people were very upset. It created a lot of tension. So there might be things like that in the pipeline where the county executive wants to get involved in some part of the school system.
How much of a learning curve do you think there's going to be for Giordano? Because I remember, for instance, even with Culver, who had his own experience with local government, that he seemed to be have these ideas that were not necessarily well thought out in terms of the fact that the council had already investigated all these things. Do you see her coming in with some preconceived ideas? I mean, what What kind of person do you think we're looking at here?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. She's pretty smart. So I think she knows the issues, but whether she can hire the right people to execute, the policies and the goals that she wants to set is another question. That's one of the big problems with the county. The constituents, voters don't really want to hear this, but there's a tremendous manpower shortage in the county right now. You look at John Pistota, who's the acting county executive. He's been basically doing 3 jobs for the last 18 or 19 months. He's been county executive. He's been doing his old job as deputy administrative director for the county, and he's never been able to hire a deputy administrator. So he's been doing all 3 of those jobs. It's been difficult for him to hire with the uncertainty of his position. His position was untenable, and ultimately he lost re-election. So if you had gone to work for him, you would probably face a new boss coming in. So that's one reason that he was not able to make a lot of the hiring that he wanted to hire. And we'll see now with Giordano whether she can hire. Right now in the county, we do not have a public works director, which we have not had for a while. The county charter says that person has to be an engineer, an official engineer. So that's a high-paying, very important job. And I don't know whether there's people in the pipeline or not. She has selected her director of administration, this Bunky Luffman, who works for the state now from Delmarva. Everyone knows Bunky. Everyone likes Bunky. But does Bunky have the experience to be a director of administration for the county? We'll see. And, will it be up to him and her to hire a really strong deputy who knows the ins and outs of county government, who's actually worked in a county government like that before? These are going to be things that we have to watch a lot. She's going to have to appoint department heads, you would assume, given on what happened when Mr. Culver came in, that certain department heads left or, were asked to leave. So she's going to have to make some big hires. And all those people have to be approved by the county council. Right now we know she's got 3 votes. We think she's got 4. Does she really, how much influence will the county council try to have on this situation? Will they agree with her, or will they stand firm as they did against Mr. Culver and not make filling those positions as easy as she thinks that they might be?
Before we leave the county council, Shaney Shields, she replaces, of course, Ernie Davis, who lost his bid for the county executive as a Democrat. What do we expect to see from her, particularly in contrast to Ernie?
Yeah, we were talking about this morning on the PAC 14 show. It's interesting because Shaney has no filter. Shaney says what she's thinking, and she comes from a venue of common sense. And then, another one on the council who's like that is Joe Holloway from District 5, who's very conservative. Shaney's very liberal. They're both people who say what they think and think what they say, very in touch with their constituents, really take people's viewpoints and make it their own in terms of presenting it to the council. I think the discussion this morning was that they're going to be, good friends, that they're going to like each other and like working together. But this is a great opportunity for Shaney she's, on the political comeback trail. We've always made fun of Shaney in a good-natured way. She understands it. She's always won elections by 2 or 3 votes for the city, even the primaries. I think she won the primary by like 11 votes. And when we interviewed her on TV, she said that she had won and then she lost based on when the votes were coming in, and then she won and then she thought she had lost. And she was trying to start her car one morning. Car wouldn't start. She's like, "Oh, how much is this going to cost?" And a friend called and said, "Shaney, you won." And she's like, "I won what?" She thought she was done. So here she won that primary, and she won decisively over Kyle Cole in the District 1 race. So Shaney's going to the county council.
I want to turn to the Board of Education because there was this Delmarva Parent Teacher Coalition, had their own candidates. What do we know about that at this point? Looks like maybe a couple of them won. The numbers I saw, Darren Lombardo, however, it looks like he was defeated. What do we make of that as opposed to the people, for instance, the non-coalition people?
So there are 7 seats, 5 from districts, 2 at large. The 5 district seats were all pretty lopsided. Of that group, you've got Alan Brown winning in District 1. You've got Susan Beecham. No, you've got Jean Malone winning in District 2. Susan Beecham winning in District 3. I can't believe I know this stuff off the top of my head. It looks like David Plotz is going to win in District 4, replacing Ann Sukowski, who's already on the school board. And then John Palmer will be reelected in District 5. Susan Beecham in District 3 is the one parent-teacher coalition type member in that group. Then of the 4 people running for the 2 seats at large, right now, in the 4th place is George Demko, who, there are nonpartisan elections, but everyone knows that George is a Democrat. Leading the ticket is Bonnie Ennis, who's terrific. Really have enjoyed Bonnie as a candidate. She's a terrific candidate. She's got the most votes of anyone. Tremendously popular. She's leading the ticket. She's going to get on the school board for sure. And then there's the muddled places. You've got Darren Lombardo and Kristen Hazel. Hazel's in 2nd place. Lombardo's in 3rd. But we saw in the primary it was the same finish in terms of the alignment. And then when the mail-in votes were counted, Demko moved from 4th to 2nd. So those mail-in ballots are going to be crucial to see if Demko gets on the board. Hazel and Lombardo, of course, are members of the coalition that you're talking about.
I want to turn to the congressional race with Andy Harris, of course. Handily beat Heather Mizure, who came in about 37% to his around 60%. We also had Michelle Gregory, who also ran for a House seat as well, and she lost to Mary Beth Carrozza, a Senate seat. What do we make of this was sort of this effort by some progressives to make these forays. Certainly, Heather spent a lot of money and a lot of ads, obviously did not make it. What are we to make of this try? And is this just simply a Republican region?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a Republican region. But what you saw here, which was interesting, Andy hasn't had a well-financed competitor in a long time. This time he did. Got lots of mailings at my house from both candidates. He had to spend more money than he's had to spend since the Frank Cradiville days when he first got elected. And when you look at it, pretty much Heather got the same amount of votes as the people who didn't spend a lot of money. So it wasn't like she changed a lot of minds out there. So, as my grandfather used to say, it was a lot of work for naught. I guess it's a shame that she wasn't able to get the traction to make it a more competitive race. Even with some advantages of redistricting. The plan ended up not being as close in terms of registration as the Democratic plan was, the one that was overturned by the court. So there was still a pretty decent Republican majority within that district. But at the same time, you even see in Wicomico, there are more registered Democrats in Wicomico than Republicans, but the Republicans prevail because of turnout and lots of other things. And then historically, when I was growing up, everyone was a Democrat, even if they were a Republican, because Democrats ran the state government. So if you wanted to be a game warden or a judge or anything like that, any kind of a state job, you had to be a Democrat. If you wanted to work at the Department of Transportation on the road crew, you had to be a Democrat because politics did extend into all those jobs. So people have sort of been raised to make their party affiliation Democrat, but then they vote Republican.
In Maryland, we have the first African-American governor, the third, I guess, nationwide. What do we make of that? And particularly, we also have the Attorney General, Anthony Brown, African-American, House of Delegates Speaker, Adrian Jones, also African-American, comes from Baltimore. Sounds as if we see a great deal of change, at least in that sense of the word.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before. I'm going to be fascinated because we've got a celebrity governor who was elected based on name recognition and things he did in the private sector. Larry Hogan was sort of the same way, but he was from a political family. But at the same time, this guy is completely untested in a state government. Does he understand the nuances of how that works? Now, he'll surround himself with people who do, certainly, and the people you mentioned, the Speaker of the House. No one knows that system better, and of course, she's aided. Her number one elected person is Sharice Sample Hughes from Salisbury, District 37A. She won her race handily too. She's the Speaker pro tem. So if anything happens to Speaker Jones, then Cherie is it. I guess she's a heartbeat away from being the Speaker. You could look at it that way. But she's very involved in that level of detail. Every piece of legislation goes through her, as well as spending. So that's an advantage to us as we have, Democrats running the state and Republicans representing us here locally. But it's going to be fascinating to see what Wes Moore's relationship is like with the Shore. Whether he's going to be, tolerant of us and want to extend money to us as Governor Hogan did pretty freely, or he'll have other concerns somewhere else.
Because there was this tension between Baltimore and Hogan, I know, for a while, and certainly Hogan saw the rural areas, which were strong supporters for him, as one of the areas that really to pay attention to. Do you think we're going to see some shift there away from the shore, or do you think those legislative folks are going to be able to keep us in the loop?
Well, I think the history is the governor, even though the Democratic governors have gotten their votes from suburban Maryland, the north part of the Capital Beltway, those areas in Prince George's County, as well as Baltimore, and the rest of the state has been red. I mean,
Right.
that's just been a case. Governor Schaefer recognized that, but he was down here a lot. He seemed to care a lot about us, even though he vilified us with his comments at one time, his infamous comment. But except for Governor O'Malley, I would argue that the Democratic governors have given a lot of preference to the shore and have been very respectful of the shore. And certainly Hogan, was, and you talk about his situation with Baltimore. People might forget that when Hogan was first elected, the whole Freddie Gray thing happened right at that time. So you had riots in the city of Baltimore. And I think Hogan wasn't initially confused, but he wasn't. It was difficult for him to go in there and be the heavy in terms of restoring order. But there was a leadership vacuum in Baltimore, and he tried to do that. It was resented at first. Then people sort of came around on it, and it seemed like it was a good move. But you also look back to history with Governor Agnew. Spiro Agnew was the governor. And there were riots in Baltimore, and he had no patience for the riots. Was absolutely, law and order throughout, and that was what catapulted him to a national spotlight.
I want to turn, by the way, to the Republican side of the gubernatorial race, because we have Dan Cox, who obviously lost badly to Westmore, did not seem to want to try to move towards the center during the campaign once he won the nomination. What do you think that means for him? Some people suggested that he's looking beyond Maryland, and that's why he basically conceded in his own mind, even though he waited till later, the race itself. I mean, what do you think that means in terms of the Republican Party here in Maryland?
Yeah, I think probably he was a bad standard bearer for the Republican Party. I think Kelly Schultz would have still lost, but made it a much more competitive race, because Maryland's a blue state. It's really hard for a true right winger and the so-called new Republicans to get any traction. He didn't. No more than his base came out. He did win Wycomico County, but not by a margin that you would think that he probably should have. And then you see that the coattails are interesting. This is one of the things too with Wes Moore, because he wasn't actively campaigning down here. He came down a couple times, but he wasn't really making it a big priority. In a case like Ernie Davis or even Brad Gillis on the county council, maybe if there had been some Democratic coattails showing up, to Democrats coming out to vote for someone that, because it might be close, that might have helped propel those candidates. That didn't happen, but the coattail effect certainly helped James win, helped Julie Giordano, and then Dan Cox, who wasn't going to win anyway, but he did win our county. In terms of his future, I've even heard a rumor that he might come to work in Wycomico County and work for Julie Giordano. It's just a rumor, but I know they're close. I don't know why he would want to do something like that. I think that he probably has a future on a national stage that that I don't understand in terms of being a lobbyist or a fundraiser or something like that. He was one of those guys I could never really get a peg on who he was or what he wanted.
We've been speaking with Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Don.
We now want to turn to Worcester County, where the election results could have an impact on the Board of Education, as well as some proposed sports complex. And Delmarva Public Media's Brian Russo sat down with Stephen Green. He's editor and publisher of the Maryland Coastal Dispatch to talk about the outcome of the election.
Let's start in Worcester County as a whole. County commissioners, what was your big takeaways from election night?
Sure, yeah. With the Worcester County commissioners, as we talked about last in your program, July decided a lot of the open seats through the primary. Most of the Republicans were running at that time. There was a District 2, which was 2 Democrats that ran, with the incumbent winning. But on Tuesday, the lone county commissioner seat up for election was down in the south end, which is Pocomoke Girdle Tree area, seat that had been held by Commissioner Nordstrom for the last 4 years, who was a Democrat. He got beat soundly, with Karen Abbott, a Republican, winning 60% of the vote. This was an election that got pretty heated, and lots of dirty laundry was aired on both. But Karen Abbott with the ground game, took down the first term Josh Nordstrom, again winning 60% of the vote. And that's going to be a very interesting dynamic because she kind of shifts the balance of power at the county commissioners. And we'll get to know more about that, really next month when she takes office.
What we've seen in these small town elections, whether it's Ocean City or whether it's county commissioner, is that ground game that you mentioned, really getting out and knocking doors and engaging with voters. Because, if you look at it, this is a small community. And so, Karen Abbott won 1,100 votes, which accounts for almost 60% of the entire vote in her district. Talk about that importance of getting out there and doing the ground game. Obviously, it's not media buys or anything like that. It's literally going out and shaking hands and engaging people.
It absolutely is. I would say Josh Nordstrom ran a good social media campaign. He had nice graphics and, was touting some of his past successes. But social media really, in our area, it's kind of actually maybe a little bit refreshing if you want to say, because social media can be such a poison as well. But yeah, Karen Abbott and her husband, John Abbott, who ran for District 1 Board of Education seat, worked the area as a couple, knocking on doors. And it does work, and my understanding from her talking to our reporter, Charlene Sharp, was they had a very good sense on election day because they saw a lot of the same people that they were at their doorstep, and they came out and voted, and they had a very good sense that they were going to win this election prior to the results even coming out. So I mentioned John Abbott and talked about the school board.
Right.
He knocked off a long-time industrial arts teacher, Bill Buchanan from Pocomoke. Bill Buchanan, 30-some years in the classroom, served on the school board. He's an incumbent. He lost, and it was a tight race, less than 100 votes, but John Abbott won. Now, school board in Worcester County are nonpartisan, but believe me, believe us all that party politics played a huge role in it. He won a seat, knocking off a longtime incumbent. And then in District 6, which is up at the north end, Bishopville area, Katie Addis knocked off Nate Passwaters. Now, he was, I guess you would call him an appointed incumbent. He replaced a longtime school board member who died suddenly in the summer. But Katie Addis won 59% of the vote, or 58% of the vote, to knock off Nate Passwaters, who has a law enforcement background. We saw this, people who work got the results. Nate Passwaters, the incumbent, it didn't appear to matter. He had been in office for about 2 years, and it did not appear to matter. The other school board seat open was District 4. An incumbent, Bill Gordy, bucked that trend, and he won heavily, 77% of the vote.
Before this election, we were talking a lot about the storyline that we've seen throughout the country where MAGA-leaning conservatives are running for school board seats. And certainly, you talk about it being quote-unquote nonpartisan, but we had that in the Worcester County Board of Education race. Katie Addis, very vocal in that respect. And then talk a little bit about some of the controversy surrounding John and Carol Abbott, or Karen Abbott, excuse me. There was some allegations about, some alleged child abuse in 2013. What will that bit of, skeletons in the closet, if you will, bring to their new public office?
Man, that's going to be really interesting to see. That was, again, Mr. Nordstrom felt under pressure. He felt he could see, I guess he sensed that he was in trouble, and he brought out all these items that were in their past. Look, all of us are savvy people now on the internet. You can search, just your case search, and there are a number of different incidents that occurred in the past. It appeared the voters really didn't, they looked past it, and that's where you kind of come up to that partisan thing. Look, we are in an area where it's just a heavy red area, and I think that people do go down the ballot on the right-hand side, or whatever side you want, but the red side for conservative Republicans. And in this case, it did not appear about questions about background. Mr. Nordstrom had some questions about background, his background too. But John Abbott, husband and wife team. First time in Worcester County history, safe to say, that a commissioner and school board member have lived in the same house.
Last thing about the Board of Education, Lou Taylor, the superintendent of schools in Worcester County, was skeptical, if you will, about some of these MAGA-leaning candidates and them being as vocal as they were. Now that many of them have been elected, What do you see that relationship being like moving forward?
Right. Yeah. The superintendent and some of the longer term Board of Education members, are concerned, and they probably have every right to be. They are looking at this issue of the book banning. That was a big issue, and that came up even a couple of weeks ago at the school board meeting. Even though the decision had already been made, seemed like a clear headline, attention grabbing type of situation because the Worcester County had already decided this particular book was going to be left in circulation, while Wacomico County did pull it. That's an issue that we've talked about before in the program about, people are using this as a political fodder to push their agenda. Superintendent Taylor typically has a school board that's backs him, pretty regularly. The idea being that he's the educator and he brings his concepts based in, the roots of teachers and, the best for the kids. He's going to have some opposition now. I will say, if you look at the 7-member Board of Education, he's going to have more support than not, but you're going to have most likely some vocal detractors. That probably be the first time I can remember that in Newark in many, many years.
That'll be very interesting to watch. We talk about scandals surrounding candidates. That leads me to Ocean City. One of the biggest headlines in the Ocean City election was just how poorly incumbent Councilman Mark Paddock, the retired police officer who has been attached and at the forefront of several scandals during his tenure, he came in dead last and is no longer on the council. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was the weakest field you could probably remember in recent Ocean City history, as far as, it was 4 candidates, 2 incumbents, Matt James and Mark Paddock, and then upcoming local businessman and firefighter Will Savage, and then the realtor Carol Proctor. Carol Proctor was somebody who really didn't do much in their campaign until maybe 2 weeks before the election. Typically when candidates file for election, they go to meetings and kind of get out and about. She didn't really do a whole lot. She is a self-admitted newcomer to the political world. But this was more of a message of what Paddock, it was more of a condemnation of Paddock than probably support for her. Paddock had just, elected officials should not bring scorn upon themselves or the elected body. I think it's, the council voted to publicly censure him when he refused to step down. Council President Matt James led that charge, to his credit. Look, there's a lot of concerns about Mark Paddock, as far as his ethics and his moral values, and it played out. And I think, editorializing was kind of relieved to see the voters. At some point, hopefully voters will draw a line in the sand saying enough is enough. And finishing in last place, about 400 votes behind the 3rd place finisher. Again, that political neophyte speaks volumes about, really kind of putting Paddock in his place a bit.
Yeah. What do you think these 2 new council members are going to bring, from Savage and obviously Proctor? We've seen people with little political background on the council before. They sort of just follow suit with the people that are veterans that show them the way. Matt James comes to mind, being the youngest, elected councilman in the city's history. Now he's council president and won more votes than anyone else by quite a long shot on Tuesday night. What do you see those 2 candidates bringing to the table? Yeah,
the point about Matt James, third time reelected, led the ticket every single time. 21-year-old elected 8 years ago. Quite a story. He had a baby on Monday. It's almost like the Kennedys, right? Yeah. But back to Will Savage is going to be, I think, an excellent council person. He's been attending council meetings all throughout the summer and through the fall. He's going to come in and be ready to roll. I think he brings that small business, public safety, and in form of the fire department. He's going to be coming and ready to make a difference. I think he'll be vocal. I think Carol Proctor would be the opposite. I think she's going to have a lot to learn. Imagine government budgeting and things like that. That's a lot for every elected official to learn.
Where do you see that, dichotomy between the council folks? Now that there's a shift, then you start doing the math. Is it a 5-2? Is it a 4-3? Obviously Matt James has grown in confidence in the past few years. John Gehrig has also been much more vocal, and obviously some of the headlines have been him and the aforementioned Mark Paddock going head to head publicly and privately and on social media. Now that's gone. As you see this council moving forward. How do you see that shaping up, 4-3, 5-2, 6-1?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see. The council has been a little bit divided of late. I think should continue on the path of the 5-2s, 4-3, 6. I think that we'll see more of the 4-3, 5-2 balance. But it's going to be issue to issue. But looking forward a little bit, because Mayor Rick Meehan was reelected Tuesday and unopposed again. But he ran a campaign. He did work. He put signs out. At some point, Ocean City will start turning to what's next for the mayor's seat. And I mean, Rick, there are 2-year terms. I would say if it was a 4-year term, I would absolutely think that Rick would be done after this. But I mean, nobody brings more knowledge to Ocean City than Rick. I mean, he's got the perspective, the background, being in office since 1985. I mean, man, that's, a world of perspective. But so who's going to run for mayor in 2 years? It's kind of the things that I think we're going to be interested to watch. Matt James, I believe, gave it a real consideration a couple of years ago. And I think John Garrick has certainly expressed an interest as well. So these are two outgoing, well-known, outspoken types that could fill that role of the mayor. Just an aside, the mayor's salary was increased at a referendum from $30,000 to $50,000.
Certainly gives him incentive to stay.
Yeah, it's
Rick has been asked this question seemingly every 2 years, every time he gets reelected. How long are you going to go? And like a seasoned veteran, he sort of deflects and does his thing. He's he has been he's been sort of the face of Ocean City for many, many, many years. And that is going to be big shoes to fill, whether it's Matt James, whether it's John Garrick. Has Mayor Rick Meehan said anything to you about his intentions?
He has not said anything publicly. I know I've read in another media outlet where he just said he will stop when it stops becoming fun, honestly, and something that he's compelled and motivated to do.
One of the other big things that we were talking about leading up to the election was this referendum that got on the ballot concerning the sports complex off Route 50, just outside Berlin by Stephen Decatur High School. That was voted down. And what does that mean moving forward? Is this dead in the water now?
Yes, that's a great question, and that's what we asked County Commission President yesterday, Joe Matresic. So the referendum was bond issues for design and construction costs, and specifically whether or not the county could bond this development project. It was voted against 52%, 9,400 to 8,500. Certainly not a clear mandate. And it did get tighter as the day went along. I remember I went to bed Tuesday night at midnight, and there was one precinct left, and it was District 3, which is West Ocean City, and that narrowed it. It speaks to the issue of, it's tight. It's not, I don't think this was any sort of like clear mandate that the public doesn't want it, but the public financing of it will not be allowed to proceed. So we asked County Commission President Joe Matresic that question that you just asked me, what happens now? He says he knew it was going to fail because he believed that people were falling for maybe some of the rhetoric that involving taxes and things like that, and that it's going to move forward. The contract will still get executed, and that the county just needs to find a new way to do it. Now, it was going to be, that's interesting to me because financing something, bonding it at low interest rate over the course of, say, 10, 20 years is a lot better for the taxpayer base, and that it doesn't have to hit an immediate hit on the budget. So now the county is going to find a way to, $15, $20 million. They're going to rely on, they say that they'll rely on state grants and things like that, and it may very well be, but right now it's an unknown.
Brian Russo with Stephen Green, editor and publisher of the Maryland Coastal Dispatch. You're listening to Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.